Week 3 brought chaos, embarrassing defeats, and blocked kicks. Let's go over all of it with our weekly NFL vibe check. There was madness all weekend long, which made this list very hard to rank, but we did it anyway. So let's go through and rank the week that every NFL team had. At number 32, the Cincinnati Bengals. Guys, we gotta talk. And I know I'm biased when I say this, but I also truly believe that the Cincinnati Bengals embarrassed themselves about as much as any team in the league did this weekend. It was a pitiful game from start to finish. And I know that because I live streamed the whole thing. And my mother was watching and she said, "Hey Alex, don't say mother." And I said, "Hey, tell the Bengals not to give up 34 points in the first half. I think that's a fair trade-off." It was truly bad. Carson Wentz barely had to lift a finger, which sucks considering I spent the whole game lifting this one. Isaiah Rodgers played in a way that felt like a personal insult, and it was the literal worst loss in Bengals franchise history. It was to the point that a girl I once hung out with in Minnesota, it can happen, DM'd me to send her condolences. She just wanted to see if I was okay. This is what you do to me. While I firmly believe Jake Browning is still an above average backup, and people's opinion of him is based solely, and I mean solely, on the most recent game he played, Week 3 was a performance of his that he really should forget. The battle of backup quarterbacks became a battle of exclusively backups by the fourth quarter. There were 5 turnovers, 2 of which resulted in Isaiah Rodgers touchdowns, and another one of which resulted in a 62-yard field goal by Will Reichard. When you do a live stream and you wear a paper bag during it and nobody questions it, that's when you know you're having a bad time. I actually had to take the paper bag off because it started to get pretty hot in there. And I was like, how could it get hot inside a paper bag? There's a fan in here. At number 31, the Atlanta Falcons. Honestly, this team is more 32A than 31. They went into the stadium of the team that gave up the most points in NFL history a season ago and put up a goose egg. Michael Penix showed up in Charlotte Stadium and played like he was caught in Charlotte's web. The honeymoon phase for their new kicker just ended, as Parker Romo was so bad, it was as if his holder was Tony Romo. The Falcons had 0 points scored, 0 plays in the red zone, and a humiliating day overall. But that's not all. Shao Smith-Wade had a pick off on Michael Penix and said ciao to the rest of the Falcons defense. And later on in the game, Penix's pass to McLeod was intercepted by Michael Jackson, or as I've been telling people all week, the pass to Ray Ray was picked off by a hee-hee. Since the beginning of 2024, the Falcons are 9-11. That's something they must never forget. At number 30, the Dallas Cowboys. This defense is absolutely atrocious. They got torched by Caleb Williams for 4 touchdowns, one of which was on a flea flicker to Luther Burden. And it wasn't just him, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, and Cole Kmet also all found the end zone. On offense, they turned the ball over 4 times. Joe Milton even threw a pick at the end of the game, I assume because of FOMO. CeeDee Lamb also got hurt, Tyler Booker got hurt, and they're both out for the foreseeable future. But even worse, Trayvon Diggs is healthy, and he sucks. After giving up 2 touchdowns last week against the Giants, he gave up 1 this week to Rome Odunze. He got glazed a few years ago after catching a bunch of picks. If you catch a bunch of picks, that probably means the quarterback is willing to throw the ball your way. The Cowboys might be entering a rebuilding phase before we realize it. At number 29, the New York Giants. Another despondent loss at home. Russell Wilson completed as many passes to Malik Neighbors as he completed to Chiefs cornerbacks. Tyrone Tracy also suffered a pretty bad shoulder injury, so everyone who went to the Charlie Kirk concert can break out their Cam Scatterbo jerseys at a moment's notice. Elsewhere, near the end of the first half, Andrew Phillips committed such an egregious foul on Hollywood, he has to change his last name to Weinstein. And also Graham Gano got hurt while warming up, meaning Jamie Gillen and his mullet had to come out for an extra point that ended up being blocked. It was a brutal showing for a Giants team that now has to change from a moonball thrower to a dart thrower. Meanwhile, Jameis Winston will have to endure photoshops of him in Bengals jersey for the rest of, the next season. At number 28, the New Orleans Saints. This team just fell flat on its face from the get-go. They were down an appalling 38-6 at halftime, I assume because they wanted to be better than the Bengals at something. They ended up holding the Seahawks to 6 points in the second half, and Spencer Rattler had a pedestrian performance. However, they dealt with awful special teams play, particularly in the first quarter. Not only did they have a punt blocked, but of their 2 punts in the first quarter, that was the better result of the two, because the other one was taken back to the house by Torrey Horton, who may or may not be the reincarnation of Torrey Holt. They had 11 penalties, and Spencer Rattler threw as many passing yards as Sam Darnold while completing twice as many passes. Just a rough week overall for the Saints. At number 27, the Los Angeles Rams. You're up 26-7, and what do? You give up 26 unanswered points in the second half. And all of that culminated with 2 blocked field goals, the latter of which was taken back to the house by Jordan Davis at the end of the game. The inability to convert in the red zone did not help. Yeah, they had 2 touchdowns, but they also had 4 field goals from Josh Carty, 2 of which were from 33 yards and 28 yards. It was an absolutely disgraceful second half, and they lost a game that they very much could and should have won, which is not good for a team that really prides itself on good coaching. At number 26, the Tennessee Titans. Right as I was writing this, I discovered a bleak story. Brian Callahan has handed over play calling duties to Bo Hardegree. Honestly, I think it's a pretty fitting job considering calling plays for the Titans has a really hard degree of difficulty. If we're being honest, this team is just a continuation of what it's been of late. Cam Ward is developing, but he also gets sacked a lot. Alec Ayumanner is really producing in the red zone, but also their defense didn't stand a chance against the most surprising player in the NFL this year. This team is not good, and they are a candidate to be the worst team in the league this year. Brian Callahan relinquishing play calling duties is a pretty telltale sign that things aren't going well, and this is an opportunity for him to take less of the blame. This might be what happens when you learn the head coaching ropes from Zach Taylor. At number 25, the Arizona Cardinals. This just went down in a really rough fashion. Yes, the Cardinals lost as time expired. And yes, they would have won if the 49ers had Jake Moody. And yes, they held the ball for 35 minutes, and their touchdown went to Trey McBride. Honestly, I'm just happy he didn't take 98 catches this time. They also suffered an unfortunate season-ending injury as James Conner went down with a broken ankle. They now have to rely on Trey Benson and Benny Hill gift Kyler Murray, all while Cardinals fans beg their front office to sign a running back that they didn't realize has been washed up for 3 years. Drum roll, please. Even I groaned at that one. The last second loss, losing James Conner, and sentencing Marvin Harrison Jr. to the purgatory this is going to be his year that Kyle Pitts has every year, is just tough. At number 24, the Green Bay Packers. This was not supposed to happen like this. The Packers were the hottest team in the league, Super Bowl favorites. They traded for Micah Parsons preseason, and they went to Cleveland and fell flat. And they suffered a fourth quarter collapse against a team that usually spends all 4 quarters collapsing. They were up 10-0 with 10 minutes to go, and then they let the Browns come back and score 13 unanswered, which ended with an Andre field goal. And in week 1, that guy couldn't hit Lake Erie from the big Browns helmet. During that stretch, the Packers committed 5 penalties, the last of which the Browns did not accept, because that means they would have had to let their kicker try another game-winning field goal, and that's just bullshit. This was a fourth quarter collapse by a team that constantly deals with the narrative that Jordan Love isn't a clutch quarterback. This did not help his case. At number 23, the Houston Texans. I have a feeling this offense is going to pride itself on the one bomb they throw to Nico Collins per game and literally nothing else. They are going to find themselves in a lot of slugfests this year, and this was no different. I mean, they currently have the NFL's lowest scoring offense and the AFC's best scoring defense. Kind of a weird conundrum. They had an opportunity to put this game on ice, but Nico Collins fumbled the ball near the Jags' red zone. Then they went down the field and scored a game-winning touchdown after a long Brian Thomas pass and a run on the next play from Travis Etienne. On defense, yeah, you did okay this week, but Derek Stingley getting hurt did not help. And he got hurt at a really inopportune time. And is there really an opportune time for one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL to get hurt? Nah. At number 22, the New England Patriots. Boy, did this team have every opportunity to win this week. Unfortunately, they committed 5 turnovers, and 4 of them were fumbles. Ramondre 3000 had 2 fumbles, and Antonio Gibson and Drake May had 1 apiece, I assume because they wanted to help Ramondre feel good about himself again. Those turnovers, in addition to Drake May being sacked 5 times, was ultimately the deciding factor in this game. Hunter Henry being an absolute boss was very cool to see, though. At number 21, the Las Vegas Raiders. How do you cope with this game if you're Trey Tucker? You have the best game of your life, you're riding high, and it's because you accumulated stats in garbage time. All while your team lost to its old backup quarterback. Other than Trey Tucker's blow-up game, this team didn't do well at all. Myers and Bowers were pedestrian, the offensive line surrendered 5 sacks, and Ashton Jeanty couldn't establish the running game that he's desperately been trying to establish. Not a lot of mistakes by the Raiders, they're just not a great team overall. And the offensive line being as bad as it is really does not help. At number 20, the Miami Dolphins. For a team that's falling as quickly as the Dolphins, resting your laurels on the fact that you didn't get blown out is not a good scenario. Tua was okay, but he threw a brutal fourth quarter interception, I assume because he missed seeing turn the ball over tweets en masse. But also, he did not get sacked at all in the game, but he only managed to put up 146 yards. It's a truly horrid situation to be in if you're Miami. They're not good with Tua, but they fall off of the face of the earth if they have any of their backups in. The team itself looked okay outside of letting Josh Allen be Josh Allen and letting James Cook be James Cook, but they have now allowed the most points in the NFL, and they've given up at least 31 points every week. Hoo-ah! At number 19, the Baltimore Ravens. This team's offense will always exist in a positive light, especially if Lamar Jackson's QB1, even if he does take 7 sacks in a game like he did on Monday. And Derrick Henry will be foundationally solid until he loses his power. But there are some holes on this team that are starting to show. The defense has not recovered since Mike Macdonald left to become the head coach of Seattle, especially since the Ravens are now 1 point away from having given up the most points in the league. The team now sits at 1-2, and they've got the Chiefs next week. The vibes aren't bad in Baltimore, but the record does not inspire confidence. Mark Andrews is so back, though. At number 18, the Denver Broncos. The Broncos lost on a last-second field goal for the second week in a row. A lot of it was aided by the fact that Sean Payton wanted to punt on 4th and inches, after which the Chargers marched right on down the field and tied the game. And Denver was absolutely and completely hapless from that point on. They played a much sloppier game than the Chargers, who were only penalized 3 times as opposed to Denver's 10. To put that in perspective, Denver had 9 first downs. Not a good day at the office for the offense overall outside of J.K. Dobbins and Cortland Sutton. Good defensive day, meager offensive day. The stuff of Sean Payton's dreams. At number 17, the New York Jets. Oh boy, how they almost pulled it off. The game was a lot closer than people expected it to be. But Todd Bowles, I guess, wanted to relive his memory of watching the Jets lose at the last second. Unfortunately for Jets fans, watching another team's quarterback inevitably drive down the field and lead their team on a game-winning drive was all too familiar for Jets fans. Even with their backup quarterback of Tyrod, I really hope he retires soon because I'm tired of thinking I'm mispronouncing his name, Taylor, having an okay performance. It just wasn't enough to overcome the Bucs' game-winning drive. Enjoy Will McDonald while you have him, Fireman Ed. And before I go any further, if you like what you've seen so far, subscribe to the channel. I've got plenty of shorts coming up. I do these previews every week, and I also have to have a long-form video out every single weekend, just a funsies one. I also do stand-up comedy. Come see me when I have shows. It's on my website, alexschubertcomedy.com. And now, back to the video. At number 16, the Tampa Bay Bucks. You can't have a good week if you lose Mike Evans and almost lose to the Jets at home in the same week. The Bucks were up 23-6 at one point, and the Jets very nearly cemented a comeback after Will McDonald pulled a Jordan Davis on the Bucks and ran the ball back into his own end zone. However, the Jets couldn't escape the inevitable as Baker Mayfield, Emeka Egbuka, and even a little helping from Sterling Shepard helped them drive down the field. And all that cemented a game-winning 36-yard field goal. And this field goal would not be blocked. Though, if you're the Bucks, wouldn't complain too much. You're 3-0 and you're getting Chris Godwin back soon. At number 15, the San Francisco 49ers. They also won at the last second, and their defense was able to contain the Cardinals' offense for the majority of the day. However, they lost Nick Bosa for the year due to an ACL injury, and I'm no longer counting injuries against the 49ers because that's just how goes. Though in a lot of senses, it truly was an encouraging week. Ricky Pearsall has truly emerged as a target that can catch bullets from quarterbacks instead of people who won his Rolex. Eddie "Not Jake Moody" Pinheiro hit the game-winning field goal as time expired. Also, the 49ers might be getting Brock Purdy back from his turf toe injury sooner than they realize. Must be nice. At number 14, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would argue the Steelers didn't win, the Patriots lost this week. Well, the Steelers defense won this week because they forced 5 turnovers on the Patriots. They forced 4 fumbles and recovered 4 fumbles. And the only defensive player on both of those lists? Well, I don't want to talk about it. This offense just got over 200 yards of total offense. The defense made big play after big play, and that enabled the Steelers to get their first win in Foxborough since 2008. I think that was the year Matt Castle started for them. I could be wrong. I think I'm right though. They can't rely on this way to win every week. At least they didn't let the Patriots score on their kickoff. At number 13, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They did everything they could to not win this week, and they still pulled it off. After a rough start to the season, Brian Thomas Jr. made a huge 46-yard catch with 2 minutes to go, and then Travis Etienne scored on the very next play. For Jags fans, they hope this catch from their Pro Bowl receiver can help him rebound from his early season struggles, and it can really be the start of something new. Not now! They forced 3 turnovers on Houston, only allowed them in the red zone once, and were the nail in the coffin for CJ Gardner-Johnson's time as a Texan. You can't complain about 2-1. At number 12, the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers were the better team this week, but that's not to say they didn't have a rough go of it. They outgained Denver by 100 yards, had 20 more first downs, and still needed a walk-off field goal to cement the victory. Justin Herbert remained efficient, though the Denver pass rush got to him as they sacked him 5 times. Quentin Johnston kept up his positive streak. Keenan Allen is everyone's fantasy daddy until further notice. He might get hurt. And Oronde Gadsden is either going to be everyone's fantasy daddy, or he might fade from your view after just 1 week. Elsewhere, Najee Harris is now out for the year because his Achilles got too close to a firework, and the Chargers running backs room will now have to stay at the Hampton Inn for the rest of the year. Still though, you can't be mad at 3-0 and a division win. At number 11, the Buffalo Bills. To a much smaller degree than their win over the Jets, it was to let James Cook and let Josh Allen just be along for the ride show. Yeah, Josh Allen did everything he needed to do, but man, James Cook has been good this year. He's had at least 100 all-purpose yards and 1 touchdown in each of his 3 games so far. He continued that this week with 118 all-purpose yards and a score. The Bills also managed to get 3 other touchdowns to Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, and Jackson Terrell Bernard caught a 4th quarter pick from Tua that you, the viewer, could have caught yourself. What a way to ice a victory. At number 10, the Washington Commanders. We ride with Marcus Mariota. Mariota was exactly who he needed to be as he simply managed a Commanders offense that really gashed the Raiders on the ground. Jeremy McNichols and Luke McCaffrey both came up with the biggest plays of their careers, and Bobby Wagner and Von Miller both combined for 3 sacks, apparently because it's 2014 all over again, and Jalen Lane took a punt back to the house. It's just not a good look to get lit up by Trey Tucker, regardless of whether or not it's garbage time. At number 9, the Kansas City Chiefs. I can't believe I'm saying it like this, but the Kansas City Chiefs got a win. Good for them. Don't get me wrong, this offense isn't what it used to be. In their heyday, Patrick Mahomes was able to lob passes to Tyreek Hill, which was a privilege now held by Tua Tagovailoa. And elsewhere, Travis Kelce was able to be consistently hit up the middle, which is now a privilege held by Taylor Swift. There are signs of life, though. Tyquan Thornton has found new life in Kansas City after living up to the draft potential of every highly touted receiver drafted by the Patriots. And they also made Russell Wilson struggle to the point that Brian Daboll named Jackson Dart the starter for the rest of the year. The Chiefs are now finally in the win column. They play the Ravens next week, and neither the Chiefs or the Ravens will be 1-3 next week. Smiley face. At number 8, the Philadelphia Eagles. Not a lot more incredible endings than blocking 2 straight field goals and taking the ladder of the 2 to the house. Here's a fun stat. Jordan Davis has more touchdowns than CeeDee Lamb this year. Hee hee. The passing game revived as A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith both had their best games of the season. Yes, much of it was due to game script, but it's still good to see that happen regardless. Philly was down 26-7 and responded with a 26-point comeback. They should be very happy with 3-0, even if their offense isn't as high-flying as it once was. At number 7, the Indianapolis Colts. The Cinderella story of Daniel Jones continues. Yes, this was a win against a team that they very much should have beaten, but that's not to say that Shane Steichen's hot seat wasn't doused with a fire extinguisher. His job is safe, and Daniel Jones continues to shock the league. Jonathan Taylor has once again cemented himself as one of the top backs in the league after topping the century mark and finding the end zone 3 times, including once from 46 yards. And Kenny Moore picked off Cam Ward and took it back to the house because the spirit of Will Levis lives on with the Titans. On the downside, Rigoberto Sanchez punted once today. Real downhill slope this team is on. I can't believe I believed in Daniel Jones. He's truly regressed. At number 6, the Detroit Lions. This team is for real once again. Their offense exploited Baltimore's weak defense and had a masterful performance from David Montgomery, who topped 150 yards and scored twice. They also sacked Lamar Jackson 7 times, which tied his career high, and didn't allow a single sack on Jared Goff for the second week in a row. Even though they allowed 30 points, the defensive game plan from Kelvin Shepard was really solid. The majority of Derrick Henry's damage was limited to 1 touchdown and 1 bench. They are so back. At number 5, the Seattle Seahawks. Torrey Horton has officially arrived. Hooah. The rookie receiver from Colorado State found the end zone twice today. Once on a pass from Sam Darnold and the other on, get this, a punt return. They absolutely manhandled a Saints team that was starting to look like not total ass on offense. Kenneth Walker and JSN combined for 3 tutties, and they're now 2-1. They just bludgeoned the Saints so bad in the first half, they figured they didn't even need to try in the second half. If you're up 38-6, I wouldn't blame you. And speaking of halftime leads, at number 4, the Minnesota Vikings. Do I have to?
Yes.
Okay. Could I have placed Minnesota in the top 3? Sure, I could have. But I'm not going to because I watched the Bengals make a lot of mistakes that day. The Vikings had 13 penalties opposed to the Bengals 4, and they still whooped up on them by 38 points. Should the Vikings get rated in the top 4 when they played against a team that had a backup quarterback and barely decided to show up at all? No offense, but probably not. Is Isaiah Rodgers going to run away with the Defensive Player of the Week award so fast it's as if Jake Browning threw it to him? Yeah, probably. Dude had a perfect PFF grade on Sunday. That's unheard of. Great game by the Vikings. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to shout absolutely despicable things into a pillow. At number 3, the Cleveland Browns. Didn't see that one coming. My main takeaway from this game is that the Browns defense is just that good. They picked up Mason Graham in the draft and paired him with Myles Garrett. And they also got Carson Schwessinger to go behind him. Why did they do that? Because they needed a trio to show Jordan Love who the real boss is. And the boss of Jordan Love is the fourth quarter, but that's not the point. Cleveland was down 10-0, then that final stretch could not have gone better for them. Punt Packers, field goal Browns, interception Grant Delpit, touchdown Quinshon Judkins, field goal blocked by Shelby Harris, field goal by the guy the Browns fans wanted to run out of town in week 1. And that's your ball game. The rookie class has been superb. And now that they're doing better, especially after the good vibes this week, they have to prepare to transition from their aging quarterback to their superstar rookie with a ton of potential. Not you. That's better. At number 2, the Carolina Panthers. The worst defense in the NFL from a season ago just got the very first shutout of the season. They made the president of the Penn 9 Club look as underdeveloped as he very much may well be, as the Panthers did not allow the Falcons to have a single play run in the red zone. Bryce Young was not that productive, but he didn't need to be. He let the defense do the heavy lifting by letting them force turnovers and not allowing the Falcons to do anything at all. It was to the point that Atlanta had to bring Kirk O'Chains in the fourth quarter. This is a team that people want to see succeed. Bryce Young deserves it. The Carolina Panthers fan base deserves it. All of my fantasy teams that have Ted McMillan on all but one of them deserves it. You deserve it, viewer. You deserve it, America. We all deserve it. But you know who deserves the number 1 spot? The Chicago Bears. Jerry Jones continues to learn the lesson he refuses to learn. The Cowboys just got torched by Russell Wilson, who was then benched for the rest of the season 1 week later. And this week, they got torched by Caleb Williams, who barely broke a sweat. He had 4 touchdowns, one of which was on a flea flicker to Luther Burden, and it was a very impressive game by a team that desperately needs to find rhythm on offense. And playing against the Cowboys is the equivalent of a major leaguer being sent down to AAA to find himself again. The Ben Johnson era in Chicago has seemed to officially arrive, and Caleb Williams was named the NFC's Offensive Player of the Week as a result. Good work by these boys, and their vibes are arguably the best in the NFL this week. That's why they get the #1 spot. And thank you so much for tuning in to this week's NFL Vibe Check. We'll be back next week. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more super sexy sports content. But stay tuned for more sports content that you didn't ask for.